"I believe," he said to her softly, "this dance shall be a waltz." A waltz! She was bound to burst into flame if any more of their bodies touched. Even with the small distance between them, his warmth engulfed her. He turned her to face him and placed her hand against his shoulder, pulling the other more fully into his. And then his free hand was at her waist, drawing her into the inferno of his arms. He smelled of brandy and heat. She was nearly intoxicated just from his sheer proximity. "My lord, how did you know who I am?" "I would imagine in the same manner you knew who I am." His eyes bored into her. "You do know, do you not?" She would be perfectly content to never take another breath so long as he never stopped looking at her like that. Aurora tingled everywhere he touched her, with the delicious gooseflesh spreading through her limbs, up to her head, and then plummeting all the way down to her toes, which somehow curled beneath her. "Yes, you are the mysterious Lord Quinton." And he would think her an utter dolt if she did not manage to remove the derisible grin from her face. There was also the rather embarrassing problem of a blush spreading over her cheeks and all the way to her bosom. She looked down to see how bad it was, only to realize too late she had drawn his gaze to that very same place. "That I am." He stared at the low bodice of her gown, or rather at the display just above it, for an inordinately long period of time. Finally, his eyes moved slowly up her chest to her neck, to her chin, to her lips, where they paused yet again. She felt parched. She needed something to calm her nerves and to cool her off. Yet all she wanted to do was move closer still. Aurora licked her lips. Lord Quinton's hand at her waist flinched and grew tense, pulling her in as though on command. "I am also, Miss Hyatt, not the kind of gentleman a proper young lady should have anything to do with, not if she wishes to keep her reputation intact." "I am aware of that. Too aware, but that was the last thing she wanted to think of at the moment." "Then you must also be aware, Miss Hyatt, that every eye in the room is trained upon the two of us, including those of your chaperone, perhaps even your father." "Yes," she said, with a slight tremor in her voice. Blast him for reminding her of all the reasons she should run screaming from him, and blast her for not doing as she ought. "And yet you remain with me, dancing." "Yes," she whispered, no longer trusting her voice not to fail. He stood still and held her steady before him. "Lovely," Lord Quinton growled, just before his lips descended upon hers in a kiss nothing like what she imagined. This was nothing tender or chaste. It was needy and possessive and hot. He pulled her closer until her body was melded into his, her curves tucked neatly into his angles and planes like they had been made just for that purpose. His lips were hard and demanding, the stubble along his jaw assaulting her tender skin in a way that left her panting for more. He bit her lower lip, and she cried out, but it was muffled against his tongue as it moved inside her mouth. Aurora tasted his brandy, smooth and dark. When he suckled, her toes sang and the tips of her fingers trembled, and something both terrible and wonderful happened between her thighs. Oh, she wanted more. She wanted to do the things to him he was doing to her, to make him feel these wanton feelings. She wanted it never to end. But then he pulled his head back, the absence of his lips leaving hers aching for their return. Lord Quinton stepped away from her, removed his hands from her. He bowed his head briefly. "Miss Hyatt, I bid you good evening." And he left.